Today from the Global Lane, some of this year's best segments. Trump's Middle East peace plan is coming soon. Will it include a new state solution? And it's all right here, right now from the Global Lane. This spring, President Trump plans to announce his long-awaited Middle East peace plan. He's being tight-lipped about it. Already, some are saying the plan will be dead on arrival. Trump has worked hard to bring Gulf state Arabs into the peace process, and now another plan brings in Egypt. It's an idea called the New State Solution, which focuses on a Palestinian state in Gaza and parts of the Sinai. Here to explain more from Washington, D.C. is Yaakov Perry. He's the former head of Israel's Shin Bet Security Service and former Minister of Science and Technology. Welcome, Mr. Perry.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you for having us.
So tell us, what is the New State Solution Initiative?
Well, after more than 50 years, all the negotiations between Israel and Palestinians failed. Put the blame on Israel or put the blame on Palestinians doesn't matter. There is no solution, and we have to head toward a solution which separates the Palestinians from Israel. We are coming with a new idea, the New State Solution idea, which says that Egypt will lease 10% of the Sinai Desert. Egypt is holding 60,000 square kilometers of Sinai. We will annex it as a lease to the Gaza Strip, and we will build or help to build the new independent Palestinian state there. It gives the Palestinians a lot of benefits, like a new own state. We are not dealing anymore with the right of return. It gives Egypt a big economical power, a guarantee for security, and of course, a status which Egypt is seeking to be a hegemony in the Middle East. There are also questions that are unanswered, but the humanitarian situation nowadays in Gaza needs a quite immediate solution.
Well, the Trump administration is kind of tight-lipped about its soon-to-be-released peace plan for the Middle East, and some are already saying it's dead on arrival. What do you think is in it? Is it dead on arrival?
Well, nobody knows really what are the details. The rumors are claiming that it's based on the Clinton plan. And if it's the more of the same of Clinton plans, it will probably not work mainly from the Palestinian side. But we'll have to see and to wait to see what's coming on. The New State Solution is a solution that can work. It depends, of course, with the Egyptians, the Palestinians, the Israelis, and the moderate Arab big states. And all those that I mentioned are partners to this idea.
Well, I was going to ask you, is al-Sisi behind this in Egypt? And will the plan likely include some of the ideas of New State, Trump's plan?
Well, I hope so. And as far as we know, we have begun some discussions with people who are close to the Egyptian authorities, and it seems to be hopeful because Sisi is quite involved in what's going on in Gaza and in the Palestinian issue, and to lease 6,000 square meters is not something that probably Sisi will object.
Well, he's been receiving a lot of terrorism from the Sinai, so I'm sure he would prefer to see this. And it seems President Trump wants to use economic development and investment in the Palestinian territories, of course, with the help of wealthy Gulf states as an incentive for a peace deal. So what are your thoughts on that? And could that also apply to the Sinai?
No doubt, no doubt. The biggest Arab moderate state are sharing two interests with Israel, the anti-Iranian one and the fight against the radical Islam. Economical projects in the West Bank and mainly in the Gaza Strip are going to be part or a very important part of the solution. Yes, the answer is positive.
Well, and I don't want to be pessimistic here, but how do you negotiate peace with a divided Palestinian leadership? You have Hamas in Gaza, Fatah in the West Bank. Neither seem willing to negotiate.
You're absolutely right. What's going on inside the Palestinian population, society, is quite complicated. But I think that if we will come with a new state solution idea, which is something very creative, doable, we can roll it on. We still have some partners in the Palestinian side, and I'm sure that it will gain a majority of the Israeli public. So we have to start, because the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip is on the edge of a humanitarian crisis. And the sooner the better.
And finally, as you know, many evangelical Christians here in the United States, big supporters of Israel, and a lot of them don't support a two-state solution. So what would you like to see our viewers do? What can they do about this, if anything?
I would urge them to support a two-state solution, because a separation between Israel and the Palestinian is a must, is an Israeli interest and a Palestinian interest. And the Sinai Desert is a very, very creative idea which can work. Of course, we have questions still left about the West Bank and about Jerusalem, and we will have to solve it. But those who are supporting the existing and the survival of the State of Israel should heavily support this new state solution, which you can, of course, find more details in the newstatesolution.org.
CBN presents The I Wills of God, your path to overcoming fear and anxiety.
We're going to talk about some of the incredible promises God has made to His children.
In Pat Robertson's newest teaching, you'll discover the I wills of God. I will rescue him, protect him, answer him, be with him in trouble, deliver him, honor him, satisfy him with long life, show him my salvation, and see amazing stories of God's promises in action.
What I felt was loved and treasured.
God spared my life twice in 3 days.
The good Lord had given me a second chance.
Break free from stress and despair.
The Lord doesn't want you to live in fear, but to know the rewards given to those who love God.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit cbn.com. The I Wills of God, your path to overcoming fear and anxiety.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
A new Wall Street Journal NBC News poll finds that a growing number of Americans view the Democratic Party as being out of the mainstream on the issue of abortion. In 2015, just 4 years ago, only 34% of those polled thought the Democrat position was out of the mainstream. But the new poll finds the percentage has grown to 41%, a 7% jump in 4 years. However, 51% of those polled still believe Democrats are in the mainstream in their view of abortion. Well, joining us to discuss this social issue and more is Florida State Representative Kim Daniels. She's a Democrat from Jacksonville, Florida. Kim, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me here.
So what do you think of these poll numbers and results? Is your party out of the mainstream, or is it still in the mainstream on abortion?
Well, I believe that the polls are pretty much correct because of the recent activities that have taken place with the laws that have passed, and a lot of times what goes on in the upper echelons of the party doesn't represent what the actual people feel. And in my community, we don't believe in abortion on demand.
What's happening in Florida?
Well, in Florida, we do have a bill that's coming up before the legislature that is called the Heartbeat Bill, and it actually declares that a baby is not just a lump of flesh or a fetus, but that's an actual live human being.
So what do you think is going to happen with that? Is there a chance of it getting passed?
I think it will pass. I believe it will pass.
I know your governor would sign it, wouldn't he?
Absolutely. We have a governor that will support that. And I think that with the boldness of what happened in New York, those who sat back and wouldn't say anything, they're speaking out now, because I believe that if they want to commit infanticide or kill babies after they're born and in the late stages of pregnancy, then in Florida we need to do something now, because a little leaven leavens the whole lump, little foxes spoil the vine, and if you let these little things go by, sooner or later we'll be to where New York is.
You mind if we shift a little bit to race relations? I'd like to talk a little about race relations in the U.S. Now, I'm someone who is a child, just preteen, in the mid to late 60s in Flint, Michigan, marched in a civil rights movement, and I personally think that we've come a long way in race from those days. Now, I'm looking at it, obviously, from the perspective of a white man. What don't whites get about it? Have we come a long way, but where are we at right now?
Well, we've come a long way, but I think we can't, it's not about the race, it's about categorizing racism on one side. Racism is still an issue, but it's not just Republican racists. Yeah. You got people, Democratic racists, Republican racists. Is
your party speaking out enough against racism in its party?
Well, they're speaking out against racism, but not in its party, because I personally had to deal with a letter that came to my office where one of the head guys in the Democratic Party was sitting in a meeting calling black people colored and saying that integration, he used, well, I don't know what, the F word, messed everything up. And it was pretty bold, and there were Democrats who hid that because of political reasons. And I was the one who did a letter to demand that he be removed, because that kind of language and that it shouldn't be tolerated.
Did anybody join you in that? In your party?
No, but he still was removed. No, as a matter of fact, they didn't. So it's not about racism, it's about agenda. Racism is real. Just this week, I was in a department store shopping, you know, a big department store, and I went to the bathroom, and I had a dress on, and a woman came up to me and grabbed the tag and said, "Did you pay for this dress?" Oh, so, and then when I got out, it was a big store, and when I was in my car, and I was sitting there trying to GPS, and I looked up, I was surrounded by the police. And I was like, "Are y'all surrounding me?" They were like, "Oh, they said your car was suspicious." I had a brand new car. So profiling, I have 21-year-old boys who go to college in the same city that I work in, and we have to have codes. And when the governor had his ball, I had my gown on. I had to run because my sons gave me a code. They were surrounded by the police. So there is a lot of profiling and things like that.
How do we get away from that, Kim?
We need to be real and deal with what the real issue is. It's not a Democratic issue. It's not a Republican issue, and
it's a hard issue. It's
a hard issue, and it's an environmental. We've created an environment where in the black community, leaders, not the people, if they can't deal with something, then they start calling people racist or sellouts or whatever, and that's not going to handle the problem. People are dying. Young men, I'm burying them. My son's friends are dying.
A lot of negative stuff in our society today, but there's a lot of positive. And I know that God changed you.
Although I was the fastest female sprinter in the nation in junior college, went to Florida State. I was on the fastest relay team in America at Florida State. All three of the girls on that track team went to the Olympics on that relay team. I went to the streets. I became a crack addict, a drug addict, a woman on the streets. And right now, I sit a few blocks from the same place that I used to smoke dope, wave down cars, and do everything ungodly that you're not supposed to do. And I'm a member of the House of Representatives. So I represent hope. Jesus rescued me from that life. You know, he taught me a better way in life. And I serve a real God who brought me out. So those who don't like it, they'll have to get over it because I ain't going nowhere. The point is we need to find a place to meet, whether it's Democrats against Democrats, Democrats against Republicans. No kingdom divided against itself will stand. Those people who say that they're so inclusive or exclusive, they exclude people like me. And it's time that people know that God is the one that we need to turn to.
So it's all about heart and about America, not party.
I love America. On a bad day, America is the best country in the world.
Amen. Okay, Kim Daniels, thank you for joining us today.
It's about the competition.
I kind of put that pressure on myself, and I think people had expectations.
It's about overcoming.
We use this phrase all the time, keep chopping, keep practicing hard.
It's about going the distance.
You know, I think as a father, it's my job, you know, to lead, just be the best husband and father I can be.
Watch Going the Distance with Sean Brown Saturday night at 7:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Woohoo! Hi, Superbook fans. Here's something else you'll love. It's the new Superbook Bible app. It's packed with games, activities, and Superbook episodes that you can watch for free. Oh, no! There's trivia, a fun daily devotional, and answers to your Bible questions. Plus, an easy-to-understand Bible the whole family will enjoy. You can even create your own Superbook character. Ta-da! Whoa!
The Millsburg Falls man coming.
Sorry, pardon me. Sorry, excuse me. Ouch!
Are you getting this?
Earn super points to win daily prizes, too. And so much more! Time to get back to my adventures. See you soon! It's the new Superbook Bible app. Free downloads on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon.
Discover the I wills of God. I will rescue him, protect him, answer him, be with him in trouble, deliver him, honor him, satisfy him with long life, show him my salvation.
What I felt was loved and treasured.
God spared my life twice in 3 days.
The good Lord had given me a second chance.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit cbn.com. The I wills of God, the latest teaching from Pat Robertson.
The Barna Group has just completed the largest study ever on religious freedom in America. It took 4 years to complete, and the results are astonishing. 3/4 of the U.S. clergy now believe religious freedom is becoming less valued in our country. And 2 out of 5 adults polled, 43%, say religious freedom is worse in America than 10 years ago. Well, joining us to share more polling insights is the president of the Barna Group, David Kinnaman. David, it's a pleasure seeing you and having you with us today. So, are we losing our commitment to the First Amendment to our Constitution? What surprised you the most about this study?
Well, one of the interesting things from the study, we were looking at the perspectives of pastors in the United States. We looked at both Catholic clergy as well as Protestant leaders. And as you mentioned, the vast majority of them are concerned about the state of religious liberty. They're concerned about the tone and texture of the conversations that happen around religion. And they're also concerned about how practicing Christians will be able to practice their faith in the future. Part of that was really interesting was they were actually concerned about how they preach and teach. We found that a vast majority of pastors say they are often constrained or limited in the way that they preach and teach in today's society. They actually feel pressured to not preach on certain topics or pressured to speak on topics that they're not ready to talk about.
Well, what are some of those topics they're telling you about?
Well, we found that certainly issues of sexuality, the LGBTQ community, and recognizing sort of how to talk about that from a biblical perspective, issues of morality, values, politics, consumerism, immigration. There's all this sort of pressure to speak out on issues or to not speak out on issues.
It seems like a lot of pastors are almost afraid to preach about sin, consequences of sin, preach about hell. I know there are concerns about the decline of traditional values, and young people are dropping out of church. So tell us a little bit about that.
And one of the interesting things that we find in the research is that young people are often more willing to be challenged and to be pushed by the church than the church is willing to challenge them. And in fact, the things that we really learn about those who are resilient in their faith is they're actually taught about a lot of really deep theological truths. And we don't shy away from that in those churches that retain young people, that produce resilient discipleship. But it is certainly a more difficult environment. We see in the research that young people young Christians are telling us they feel afraid to speak up. They feel misunderstood, marginalized. It is a very difficult environment to grow up as a young Christian. And so we should acknowledge that and recognize that, but be all the more committed to teaching these young people the truth of Scripture.
Now, my understanding is this wasn't just about Christian opinions. You polled all faiths, did you, in America? Did you break down the concerns by various faith groups? Or say more Muslims, Jews, more concerned than Christians about religious freedom, or are they about the same?
Part of what we were trying to understand is religious liberty something that everyone is concerned about in the same ways? And we did find that Jewish and Muslim and other faith clergy leaders also are concerned about religious liberty as well. And I think this is an important thing, that if we're concerned about religious liberty for Christians, we also ought to be concerned about religious liberty for people of other faith groups. We found in the research among adults that there is this growing concern about religious liberty, although in the last 2 years under the Trump administration, that concern has been mitigated somewhat. But certainly when you speak to people in Christian higher education, when you talk about sort of the opportunities to sort of run institutions like adoption services and others in a very religiously plural culture, there's concerns about how will people's rights, how will these organizations, how will these churches, how will these colleges and universities, how will their rights to practice their religion, not merely to worship and to do the things in the church building, but how to practice those faith commitments out in the public square. Those are really, really large concerns that most people, they sort of feel it in the water, but they don't really know how to articulate it. And I think that's actually part of what we learned in this study, was this growing sense that we need a better way forward when it comes to religious liberty in our times today. Did any of them share with you on why they felt this was happening? Well, when we talk to faith leaders, there is this sense that we actually looked at a whole range of things, like is it a concern about LGBT agenda? Is it concerns around other sort of faith groups pushing Christianity to the sidelines? And those were some of the concerns that Christian leaders talk about. And certainly there's a wide range of concerns. I mean, part of, I think, our current moment is that we're in a much more religiously plural environment. Christianity is not as dominant as it used to be in American culture. And what can we do about sort of the concerns about this next generation? So how do we really articulate a way forward for Christianity in acknowledging that this is a different environment? In some ways, we actually think that it's a good news for Christianity to have to be not just the only voice, but one of many voices in our society today. Of course, we hope other people would become Christians, but what does it mean for us to be part of a religiously plural culture? And how do we help to love people, even if we have differences? How do we have our conversations on social media? So when we talk about discipling this next generation, how can we teach them to think about their current cultural environment? I think about the story of Daniel in the Old Testament, this young leader who was in a pluralistic, religiously, weird world, and he was able to sort of think about his context and think about theological truths that he was holding to, his commitment to prayer, his commitments to relationships, his commitments to his public square, his role as a political leader within Babylon. And in a similar way, I actually hope that would be part of our experience as Christians today, is that we realize that we are in a type of new exile here in the United States. That can be a good thing in terms of our opportunities to minister and to be effective, but to recognize that this is a much more complex environment, and that the fight for truth isn't just going to be won with sheer firepower.
And the old saying from the persecuted church around the world, more persecution, more church growth. Okay, David Kinnaman, president of the Barna Group, thanks for sharing your insights.
As the world watches from the outside,
it's a big diplomatic tug of war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline, Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Orphans Promise is committed to loving and serving at-risk children, to helping keep families together, and to creating opportunities for strong and sustainable communities around the world. We're working in over 60 countries around the world, and with your help, we can do even more. There's an old African proverb I love that says, if you want to run fast, run alone. But if you want to run far, run together. At Orphans Promise, we want to run far so we can touch the lives of as many orphaned and vulnerable children as possible. But we don't want to go alone. We're out to change the world, one child, one family, one community at a time. Will you join us?
Meet the pastors who are preaching the gospel in a fresh, fearless way. I'm Roberto Torres-Cedillo. Join me each week for Next Gen Voices. And watch God transform a generation.
Recently, House Democrats went on the record in support of illegal immigrant voting. Yes, the House voted 228 to 197, defending the practice, which is taking place in some American communities. It's all part of an effort by Democrats to gain new voters for their party. They know illegal immigrants would likely vote for them because the party supports open borders, sanctuary cities, and entitlement benefits for illegals. The thinking is, let them in, give them stuff, and they'll vote for us. And now Speaker Pelosi says it's time to add more potential Democrats to the voting rolls. Let's give 16-year-olds the right to vote.
I think it's really important to capture kids when they're in high school, when they're interested in all of this, when they're learning about government, to be able to vote.
16-year-olds don't have the emotional maturity and experience to be granted the right to vote. So think again, Madam Speaker. Your zeal to gain millions of new Democrat voters is clouding your judgment. If you want to advocate illegal immigrant voting rights and the casting of ballots by 16-year-olds, go right ahead. But Bernie, Biden, Beto or not, ideas like that may cost your party dearly in the next election. Well, that's it from the Global Lane. Be sure to follow us on SoundCloud, iTunes, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And until next time, be blessed.